This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
He's Greg, I'm Nick. Of course, it is training camp week. We've been waiting a long time for this week to actually happen. We are on the eve of training camp on this Tuesday afternoon. I remind you that the podcast is brought to you by our friends at GameTime. Take the guesswork out of buying baseball or even football tickets with the season rapidly approaching with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Greg, Jerod Mayo met with the media today, had a lot to say. Let's start with the quarterback situation. Talking about Jacoby Brissett, Mayo said, quote, pretty clear coming out of the spring that he is the starting quarterback. Do you think that's strong from Mayo or pretty much what you expected from the head coach?
Pretty much what I expected, but it was strong. I mean, I think, Nick, and you can correct me if you sort of remember this differently, but towards the end of the offseason practices, OTAs, mini camps, like it seemed like in some media circles, maybe locally, they thought Maye was really coming on and really making a push. I mean, I didn't see it that way on the field. Maye certainly had his moments, and I thought he improved over the course of the offseason. But in terms of where he is right now entering camp, and things could change in, you know, the what do we have, like six weeks, 8 weeks until the season starts? You know, a lot of things could change. But, you know, in my mind, I agree with Mayo that Jacoby is entrenched as the starting quarterback, and something, you know, both ways. Jacoby not playing well enough, maybe an injury, Drake coming on, really improving rapidly, which I do not rule out, that Jacoby is going to be the opening day starter for this team. And one thing, Nick, that I found interesting, I was listening to the GM Shuffle with Mike Lombardi, and they had on the Chiefs GM.
Brett Veach?
His name's escaping me. Yes, Brett Veach. And they were talking about Patrick Mahomes and sort of how he sat as a rookie largely. I think he played the last regular season game of the season behind Alex Smith and sort of got his feet wet. And he was talking about how, look, in hindsight, with what Patrick's done, could he have started as a rookie and been successful? Yeah, but that wasn't the plan. That wasn't the plan that Andy Reid wanted. Now, you could make the argument that the Chiefs were in better position with Alex Smith, and he had won a lot of games, might have even won a playoff game for the Chiefs or the 49ers at that point. I don't know. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look. But certainly Alex Smith was at least average at that point in time. I certainly think there was a ceiling on what you could do with Alex Smith at that time. So it bought them a little time. So you could say it's a different situation. But Veach said the plan, Andy Reid's plan, was for him to sit. And the key part of it to me, Nick, which I think people need to understand, was he said it wasn't about what he could do physically, because we all see what he can do, make plays on the move, his arm, his anticipation, all that stuff. It wasn't about that. It was about Andy Reid wanted to get Patrick Mahomes ready to be an NFL starter from a mental standpoint. And he didn't think that Patrick Mahomes was going to be ready for all of that. And I think that's something that people need to keep in mind as we go forward, that, yeah, you might see the physical skills from Drake Maye, but there's so much that goes into being an NFL quarterback and starting, you know, early on in the season, especially with a new regime, new offense, like, you know, new players, like everything's new. I don't think it would be advantageous to put Drake in that position, at least early on in the season. We can revisit that after, say, like the first month. But I think, like, people need to keep that in mind. And I think that's what Mayo and Alex Van Pelt are sort of getting at, that Drake Maye is talented. We all know that. We all see it. But there's so much more that goes into being a starting caliber NFL quarterback that they don't want to rush the process with him.
Now, Mayo did say if Maye comes out and lights it up, he could start. How much better do you think Maye would have to be than Brissett? How much better do you think he would have to be from what we saw at minicamp to actually start this season as QB1?
I think it would have to be clear cut. It would have to be Drake Maye is clearly better than Jacoby Brissett, and he has advanced as far as the mental side of the game, that he is ready to take on, different blitzes and different coverages and all that stuff. And we're not really going to know that. The coaches are going to know that from the film, from the joint practice against the Eagles. I think if you're looking for a barometer, a measuring stick for Drake Maye, and we saw this with Mac Jones when he supplanted Cam Newton, it was against Philly down there.
Right.
And there was also the Giants practice here that where Mac Jones took the next step, and then he sort of, followed through on it against the Eagles. Like, I think if you're looking for a place in the schedule where you're like, all right, here's a good barometer on where Drake is and does he have a chance to do this, to me, it would probably be the joint session against the Eagles.
All right, let's jump to some other players outside of the quarterback competition. Godchow, Judon, two guys we've talked about an awful lot the last couple of weeks. Mayo said they're here. He and Elliott Wolf want them here. And he said that they are expected to practice. I underline the word expected. But they are both here. Do we expect them to be out there tomorrow? Do we expect them to be active participants, Greg, with the proceedings?
Now, I'm just judging Matthew Judon off of his words when it comes to, practicing. Now, we obviously went over what I reported and his response, which we also pointed out that was a denial, that he could have come out and said, I'm fine with my contract. I'm playing this year, and I look forward to free agency after this year. He hasn't said anything close to that. So, and from Mayo's comments, from Matthew Judon retweeting a trade proposal that would send Matthew Judon to the 49ers, and Matthew Judon retweeted that.
Yeah.
I think, let's all be adults, and let's acknowledge that Matthew Judon and Devon Godchow are not happy with their contracts. And as I reported, they are not going to play. They don't intend to play on those contracts. We'll see ultimately what happens. And it's good that Mayo's at least putting the olive branch out there that they want to make something work. And Mayo basically acknowledged, like, something has to be done to appease these guys. And we're interested. They're interested. Now it's about finding smart common ground for both sides. We'll see whether that happens. But if you were asking me right now, and you are asking me right now, by the way, will those guys practice? I would say Matthew Judon practices in some manner, at least individual stuff, probably pick and choose team stuff that he's involved with. It would surprise me if Devon Godchow does anything. I think that he didn't go through this like Matthew did last year, and Matthew admitted that he learned lessons from that. And maybe he blames his injury on part of not doing enough in the ramp up to the season. And he said he's not interested in doing that again. And so I'm going to take him at his word on that. Godchow really hasn't said much, and he's much more of a businessman, at least outwardly, than Judon. So I think Judon's going to take part in some form. I don't think Godchow is going to do much of anything.
Let's move to the offensive line. Mayo said that, look, we're going to play the best five, whether that means Mike Owenu's at guard or he's at tackle. We're going to play the best five guys. Is that what he should be saying? Is that the approach that you think is right? And also, Greg, where do you think Owenu ends up playing?
I think he ends up playing right guard. I think they're going to, push, at least initially, to allow Caden Wallace to be the right tackle, position he played in college. It's not unusual. In fact, it's the normal course for a quote-unquote potential left tackle as a rookie to start at right tackle. We've even seen it with the Patriots. Nate Solder started at right tackle, then moved to left tackle. Matt Light started at right tackle, then moved to left tackle. This is the way things go. That if, and the Patriots obviously think Caden Wallace is talented enough to play tackle in the National Football League. They think he has left tackle potential. So if he's that good, and he's going to have to prove it on the field this summer, I think that I think that he starts at right tackle. I think Owenu's at right guard. To me, in my mind, and I'm hopeful to write on this at some point this week, Nick, but I've been taking a look at some of the other guys, most notably Nick Leverett, who they brought in, who I think played for the Rams last year, didn't play much at all, but he played a lot for the Buccaneers with Tom Brady under center. And I've been watching some of his film. And in my mind, look, I would say that Okorafor was more impressive on film and has more of a chance. But I do think Leverett has his pluses, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a competition between City So, Nick Leverett, and perhaps Michael Jordan, another reserve guard. Maybe Layden Robinson gets in the mix. I think there's going to be competition for that left guard spot. And also Nick Leverett has played some center, including with Tom Brady. There was a Falcons game, Buccaneers against the Falcons, where he started at left guard, but because of an injury, he moved to center and looked to do a decent job. So he has some versatility there.
You know, looking at the offensive line, it feels like, and maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me if I am, but it feels like you are a little bit higher on some of these guys than some of the other media. And, you know, I always think you watch the film, and I know you get your balls busted over that, but you do watch offensive line play, and you keep a close eye on it. So I feel somewhat optimistic after hearing your thoughts on guys like Okorafor and Leverett. And maybe they can put this thing together, and maybe Elliott Wolf wasn't as much of a mad scientist as just a smart football evaluator. And I was asked a question over the weekend on 98.5 when I was working with Cerrone, and I think I was also asked when I was doing a pod with Taylor Kyles yesterday, like, who is the most important member of that offensive line? To me, it's Chuks Okorafor, because if Okorafor works out at left tackle, everything else kind of falls into place, and you can mix and match and make it work. So it'll be interesting to see when the pads come on how those guys look, but hopefully they look good. And maybe, crazy to talk a little optimistic here, I know, people, I understand, but maybe, just maybe, this offensive line ends up being at least decent, and we're not talking about a 5-alarm fire. One of the most...
Yeah, Nick, one thing on that to follow up real quick. Like, I am optimistic about Okorafor. I think between City So, Nick Leverett, I haven't watched any of Michael Jordan yet, but I will try to do that at some point. I think they will figure out left guard. David Andrews, everybody knows how I feel about David Andrews. And you have Mike Owenu at right guard that we know, when he's right and in shape and all that stuff. He's one of the better guards in the league. I would say, actually, at this point in time, entering camp, I would say I'm more worried about right tackle than any other position on the line. I am not the biggest Caden Wallace fan. I don't like players, especially offensive linemen, if there are lingering questions, which there are from the scouts that I've talked to, about how much he likes football. But I will say they have other options. Calvin Anderson is coming back. He's been a pro. He's played a lot in the league. You also have Vidarian Lowe and Tyrone Wheatley. And again, it all comes back. Like, the offensive line, I don't care what you have on there. Coaching really matters on the offensive line. And, Scott Peters and Robert Kugler, those guys are on the spot. I think there is enough talent there to give the Patriots at least an average offensive line in the NFL, if not better. And it's on them to make it work.
And remember, we've talked about this before, just to add quickly, you can survive with 4 out of the 5 being at least good or average. You can help one lineman. So if right tackle is a question mark, they need a little bit of help, they can do that. I thought one of the most fascinating comments by Jerod Mayo at this press conference today was about himself, Greg. He was talking about really his learning curve. And he said, quote, "I will make mistakes and I will learn from those mistakes," unquote. I personally loved hearing that from Mayo. He's, I think, being honest with people, and he's letting you know, look, there are going to be moments, and there might be ugly moments, but I'm going to have to figure this thing out pretty much on the fly. But I promise you, I will learn from the mistakes that I make. We'll have to wait and see if that's true. But just your overall thought about how he's approaching this and some of that honesty that he had today.
Yeah, I thought that was – I did think that was good, and that was certainly notable, and I like how he's doing that. Now, I also think it's a little bit of expectations setting. he is a very confident individual, but I do think him being able to know his limitations, that he's not going to light the world on fire, that he's not going to be Bill Belichick in his prime immediately. I don't think that's a negative. I think it's a positive. And, as long as he keeps listening and he keeps learning, I think that's good. I think also, Nick, another thing that stood out to me, because we've talked a lot about him, pushing back the camp start times on practices, and you sort of question that and the heat and all that stuff. And I thought his answer on that, to me, it was his best answer of the press conference. He talked about how, when you practice in the morning, that puts a lot on the evening meetings. And, he doesn't think that's right for the players. He thinks it's better, maybe they cut out a little bit early on the evening meetings. They certainly get what they need to get done, and then they come back and they meet again to reinforce what they just talked about, what they're about to practice. And to me, that's very smart. It's very sound thinking, and I liked his reasoning for that.
Yeah, twofold. Number one, you don't have as long of a day, right? If the players are getting in there at 9 whatever, and the practice begins at 9:30, and you're there with the meetings later on and into the evening, it's like you're looking at the clock. You might start zoning out a little bit. So that's number one. Number two, some guys might just not be great at retaining information late in the day, and then you turn around and you jump right into practice the next morning, whereas you cut out a little early, like you said, Greg, so it's not as long of a day. You get a little bit more rest, and then you come in the morning and you talk, you have those meetings, and it's right out to the practice field to do what you just talked about doing. So it makes sense to me. We'll see if it works out. One thing from the players, there wasn't a lot. I mean, Jacoby Brissett spoke. He said everything you would expect him to say. David Andrews, same thing. Juwan Bentley, same thing. But the one newsworthy item to me was Jonathan Jones coming out and saying that he's going to be a full go. So he sounds like he's ready to start training camp tomorrow. He is physically fit. He was out of minicamp, according to him, because of an off-season surgery, but he is healthy. He's ready. And I don't know if you feel the same way, Greg, but outside cornerback too, whoever plays opposite of Christian Gonzalez, that's one of the competitions that really interests me here early in camp.
Yeah, for sure. I think as long as Jonathan Jones is healthy, I think he will certainly be the number 2 cornerback on the field. Again, there aren't too many defensive sets where you are just playing with 2 cornerbacks. So, it's really sort of moot. But, if somebody emerges on the outside, say Alex Austin or Isaiah Bolden or Marcellus Dial or, whoever, if they emerge in camp and allow Jonathan Jones to be on the inside, and we also have Marcus Jones, we haven't really talked much about. We'll see where he is at physically in training camp. I think that certainly puts the Patriots in good position on defense. It's the middle of the summer. It's hot. But you know what summer means to me? Baseball. I love going to the park. I love supporting the Old Town team. And when I want to go see my favorite team, GameTime is the perfect place to go. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying baseball tickets. I was just looking at the website, GameTime.co. They also have the app, GameTime. I was looking, big event coming up, a New York team coming to Boston, red hot hometown team. I got to tell you, the prices are a bit pricey for the first game of the series, but guess what? On GameTime, they have these things called flash deals. So an outfield grandstand ticket that normally costs $152, it's $132, $20 off. That'll get you in the park. That'll get you a good view. Nobody in front of you, no poles in front of you. That's the kind of stuff you find when you go over to GameTime. You know what I also love about GameTime? Well, there's a few things, okay? I love seeing the view from your seat on my phone before you buy. That's a must. I won't buy tickets from any place unless it has that. GameTime has it. Also, the all-in pricing shows your total cost up front. you go to these other sites and you're like, oh, that's a good deal. Suddenly you get to the end and there's all these fees and taxes and other things, and all of a sudden you're paying double than what you thought. That does not happen at GameTime. So make sure you get over there. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Let's jump into some camp preview questions, some of the overarching big questions that I have for you, Greg. Let's start with the head coach. What do we expect from Mayo's first camp here?
I think it'll be a little bit more player friendly. Certainly, the schedule. It seems like from the schedule that we've already received, and it's very limited. I think it's only through the second preseason game, which I think is when they can close up shop. Maybe it's the first preseason game. I'm not sure, but after their first preseason game, they have a long layoff. Like, they're not going to really practice. Like, they play on a Thursday. They're not really going to practice hard again until Monday. Now, they are going to have something Sunday that's not open to all the fans. It's open to the media, but I assume that's going to be light. So that's something that Bill Belichick had done in later years. But I do think from, what we saw in the spring, some of Mayo's practices were long and hard. Now, we've talked about I didn't like some of the timing and how they utilized, how efficient it was. So I'd like to see a little bit more on that side of it. But, I don't think there's only so much you can do to be different in training camp. I've certainly been to some that stand out. Chip Kelly, when he was with the Eagles, I've never seen a more efficient training camp practice than what Chip ran on different fields at the same time and all that stuff. You can do, but most of them in general, they're all pretty much the same. And so I don't know how much we're going to be able to take from that.
All right, let's talk quarterback job. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier and how much Mayo would have to do to kind of leapfrog Brissett. Handicap it for me right now. On the eve of training camp, who wins the quarterback job? Give me like a percentage, Brissett versus Maye.
Yep. I would say as of right now, Jacoby Brissett has an 85 to 90% chance to be the opening day starter.
All right. So Greg is thinking Jacoby Brissett, QB1 to start the year. We'll see if he's right.
Yeah, and I will say, Nick, that's more about where the Patriots are in their program. It's no reflection on Jacoby or Drake.
Right.
I just think, and I had this discussion with Michael Holley last night where he was, talking about all these different quarterbacks, like whether it was RG3 or CJ Stroud or, who there were a couple more examples that he had. And, my point was, like, you can't really compare those situations to where the Patriots are, because whether it was in terms of coaching or personnel, all of those situations were much, much further along. I mean, like, you could say the most apt comparison in his mind would be the Texans, because you brought in a new head coach, you have a rookie quarterback, and boom, they're better. Yeah, but that's also leaving out that Nick Caserio over multiple years had been accumulating talent, including a franchise left tackle, some really good receivers and running backs, and, along with, defensive guys that they, traded up for and loaded up on, including a cornerback and edge rusher. And, so the Patriots are just in a different spot. And I think when you're talking about a new head coach, a new offensive philosophy altogether, from where a lot of these guys, any returning veterans have been, I just think it's way too much. It's way too volatile for a rookie quarterback to come in and really, like, take the program to the next level. Like, it would be, you could make that comparison, say, next year if the Patriots drafted Drake Maye and Mayo was going into his second year, Alex Van Pelt had a year under his belt, Elliott Wolf now just had his second draft where he's upping the thing, and maybe he got a wide receiver and, all that stuff. I just think the Patriots, where they are, they're sort of like at least offensively, it's a complete rebuild. And so for a rookie quarterback to come in and raise everybody up, to me, it's not really in the realm of possibility unless Drake Maye is just one of these unicorn guys that, we all of a sudden he lifts everybody.
Let's get back to the offensive line. I mentioned earlier about Chooks. If Chooks holds his water at left tackle, a lot can fall into place for this offensive line. My question for you, Greg, is what if Chooks doesn't work out at left tackle? How does the team handle that? How do they pivot?
I think they just deal with it internally. A couple different ways. Is the rest of the offensive line really good, including right tackle, Caden Wallace or Owenu, whoever that is? Is the rest of the other four guys playing at a really high level? And, you could help a core four a lot. You could say, all right, well, we're going to leave Caden Wallace alone. He's proven he's okay. We're going to give more help to the left side. We're going to put the tight end over there a lot. We're going to chip with the back. You can solve it that way. Or, Calvin Anderson, the year before he came to New England, he started a lot of games for the Broncos at left tackle. Wasn't great, but he's done it. Is he more consistent? Do you think that he's better with help than a core four would be with help? Vidarian Lowe has a slight chance to do it. Tyrone Wheatley, or, has Caden Wallace played well enough at right tackle where you say, you know what? We might as well start this process early. Let's put him over there and maybe put a core four back at right tackle. So there's a bunch of different moves. If you're looking for an outside solution, ain't happening. Not enough tackles available around the league, not enough good tackles, and anybody who's good, teams hold on to them, like grim death.
Yeah, you'd be talking about maybe, Charles Leno's been mentioned. Humphreys is another name.
Donovan Smith,
who hasn't been, healthy in the last 3 years or so. Those are the names that you'd be picking from if you're looking at some kind of Band-Aid at left tackle. All right, let's jump to receiver. A lot of people talking about Pop Douglas, Greg. Pop Douglas this, Pop Douglas that. I think the expectations are pretty high. Are the Pop Douglas expectations maybe a little too high?
Only in terms of his injury risk, which is a lot because he's a little guy, and little guys don't last long in the National Football League unless they have some sort of superhuman strength. Like, for example, like Tyreek Hill is, built like a brick shithouse, especially in the lower body. And, that doesn't look to be, Pop Douglas, doesn't look to be Marcus Jones. So you worry about those guys, or guys like Tyquan Thornton. To me, if Pop Douglas is healthy, and I do think that part of when you talk about like what his potential for the Patriots, I do think that usage is going to have to be something that they keep an eye on and think smartly about, because he is a playmaker and you don't want to expose him too much to risk. But in my mind, he looked great to me. To me, injuries are the only thing that can hold him from being a very effective player.
The usage thing is interesting because Alex Van Pelt has talked about wanting to run the ball. Cleveland ran the ball a lot the last couple of years. They give Stevenson the extension. They bring in Gibson. And I wonder, if they are going to go pretty big early on the early downs and they try to establish that run and run the football as much as they want to, how much is Pop on the field? Because, again, he's not a big guy. He's not going to be blocking dudes downfield. So the usage is something to keep an eye on. All right, your surprise of camp.
Good question. My surprise of camp. I don't know if I'm hoping against hope on this. Well, I'll say this. I think that a guy that we haven't seen much of yet, due to a hamstring injury that he had coming out of the draft cycle, I think that Deshaun Fenwick, the running back. I think he's going to be a preseason game hero, and I think he's going to make this team, and he could get some decent snaps this year.
Let's flip it now. Your disappointment of camp.
I think it would have to be, let's see. I think I'm going to go with, the bar's pretty low on this player. Guys that I expect to underachieve, Taekwon, Juju, KJ Osborne would probably be my guy after what we saw in the offseason practices. I know they have high hopes for him, but I hope he comes to training camp with stickum on his hands because that was not the case in the preseason. And I do think he's a good player, and I do think he can help this team. He's just got to catch the ball better.
All right, I have a few more questions for Greg outside of just the Patriots. But first, I remind you, take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Also, don't forget about Boston Sports Journal. Many of you know it by now, $50 for the year. Bedard, Giardi tag teaming on the Patriots for film. Best sources around to give you the most accurate reporting on your football team this season. Okay, a couple of NFL things out there today. Let's start with Brandon Ayuk. So Ayuk is reporting to training camp, according to Mike Garafolo and the NFL Network. John Lynch just told reporters a few moments ago that they will keep working on a deal for Ayuk. Quote, Brandon's a big part of our team, and we expect he will be here. He will be this year, unquote. Surprised at all, or can we just finally put this Ayuk thing to bed?
Yeah, I think we need to put it to bed. I mean, one thing that we haven't talked about is just the reality of the situation. I understand Brandon Ayuk wants to get paid, but there are contract mechanisms that his union agreed to that the 49ers are following along. Like Brandon Ayuk is playing on the 5th-year option this year at like $14 million. Like, it's not what he wants. There have been reports that the Patriots were willing to pay him $28 million a year, but it is what it is. And they also have control the next year if they want to franchise tag him, which would probably be over $20 million a year. And so I understand where he's coming from. To me, that he's reporting, we'll see if he takes part. I doubt that he does, but we'll see. But that he's reporting, at least, it can be viewed as an olive branch with the team and maybe an indication of, a show of good faith that let's make something happen. And, like I've been saying from the beginning, the San Francisco 49ers, unless they can get somebody who is just as good or better than Brandon Ayuk, which probably wouldn't happen until next offseason in the draft, he is there. They don't have anybody else like him. He's a key to their offense. One of the big keys, and this team is pushing for a Super Bowl. They've been knocking on the door, went to the Super Bowl last year. They want to win it. They want to win title number 6. They've been sitting on 5 for a long time, and that's not going to happen if they trade Brandon Ayuk and they have nobody else ready to go that's like him, and that's not likely to happen. So, yeah, I think people need to really put that to bed.
Quick follow-up here, just because of the report you brought up. Pro Football Talk over the weekend reporting that the Patriots were one of 5 teams willing to pay $28 million per year for Ayuk at draft time going back in April, and that the Patriots offered a second-round pick, which obviously was pick number 34. Just quickly, do you think that offer from Elliott Wolf was fair? Do you think he should have offered more, or do you think it was too much to offer?
I think it was a fair offer. I mean, it was basically sort of like a first-round pick. And yeah, I think it was a fair offer, given that there's the draft pick compensation, but there's also, they have to pay him a new contract. They have to pay him $28 million a year. Yep. Probably would have been, I don't know, 50, anywhere from like 60 to $70 million guaranteed. So you factor in, all of that. Now, if the 40, now my understanding is that that's what the Patriots, you were sort of like, trolling, offering, like being like, okay, well, let's throw this out there. And the 49ers just sort of shut everything down. Now, if the 49ers were like, maybe, what about X, Y, or Z? Like, I think the Patriots, I think Elliott Wolf would have been interested in that and would have furthered the conversation and maybe throw in a Judon or, maybe a future pick or what have you. I think they would have been interested in that. I just think the 49ers shut it down.
Hard Knocks, new episode coming out tonight. The NFL had a clip on Twitter of Joe Schoen giving Elliott Wolf a phone call 4.5 hours before the NFL draft began in April, trying to pry that third pick from Wolf. And Wolf kind of says, well, if you're going to give me a 1-2-3 this year or a 1-2, and then he stops himself and says, obviously I'm exaggerating a little bit. Shane kind of goes back at him, and it seems like there could have been an edit somewhere in the middle of this, but it ends with Wolf telling Shane it would have to be significant. It would have to be a significant offer situation that we have, probably just staying and sticking and picking a quarterback there. Watching that conversation, I don't know if that's anything new to you, but watching it, Greg, and listening to it, do you kind of walk away feeling better about Drake Maye, knowing that the Giants were absolutely trying to chase him and that Wolf did kind of draw the line at, hey, man, if you want this pick, you better be bringing the bag to us because we're not going to trade it otherwise?
Yeah, if Brian Daboll really wants a quarterback, I'm all ears, and I'm on board because I have a lot of respect for Dabes and what he's done, and his track record sort of speaks for itself. And so, I do think he saw a lot of Josh Allen and Drake Maye, maybe even less downside than Josh Allen, not as quite the bucking bronco that Josh Allen was when he came into the league. But that it just, reinforces my belief in sort of what we talked about. And I'd push back against the Felgers of the world who would say, why are you even listening? Like, if you really believe in the quarterback, why are you even listening? And I was like, because somebody might get stupid. I mean, and I think I used the analogy. I said, if somebody offers you the Herschel Walker trade, you got to think about it. You got to think about, if somebody gets nuts and they're so horny for Drake Maye that they're like, we're going to offer you 3 number 1 picks. And it's the Giants and they have Daniel Jones at quarterback. And, from what we've seen on Hard Knocks, not exactly a buttoned up, well-run organization at this point in the front office. Yeah, you got to think about it. You got to think about it long and hard. And that basically reinforces what I said all along. I said the Patriots are going to pick a quarterback, likely Drake Maye, unless they are completely blown out of the water on a deal that could reshape the franchise and they can't turn it down.
This is, interesting sliding doors moment, but I do wonder, the Giants, they traded one of their second-round picks for Brian Burns in March. And I do wonder, if they waited to make a move like that and had that second-round pick, it was number 39, would that have been a sweetener that Shane could have offered Wolf? And maybe Wolf would have moved on that if it was, 6 in the draft and then pick 39 and then like a future first, because the reports are that Shane offered I think it was a first this year and like the next year's first or whatever, which that's just not going to get it done. You do wonder if there might be some regret from the Giants, especially if Daniel Jones is a puddle. Man, maybe we should have held on to that second-round pick and we would have had something else as a carrot to kind of dangle in front of Elliott Wolf. And instead we burnt that pick on Burns.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, that's Nick, that's that. And remember the first conversation that they showed on Hard Knocks at the Combine, and Wolf was like, were you guys 6? Yeah. And he was like, that's a good spot. And, getting all that and just dropping down to 6. And okay, so you get the 4th quarterback. And from what I understand, whether it was the top 3, JJ McCarthy, or even Penix, the Patriots had a level of comfort with all of them. And you get that haul, you get, say, JJ McCarthy at 6, you have 34, you now have 36 or whatever, 39. Like, you could have gotten a wide receiver, you could have gotten a tackle, you could have, it's and still been in a similar spot. But unless they were going to get crazy, you got to go with the guy that you have the most conviction on.
And when you extend that conversation, if that did kind of happen and you go down that road, we know that Wolf tried to trade back into the first round for a receiver. Would he have been more aggressive with 34 and then willing to give up another pick because he had 39? Or would he offer 39 and another pick to move up into the first round? Maybe he would have had more ammunition, obviously, with that trade. So maybe he does get back into the first round. It's an interesting, like I said, sliding doors moment. Last one for you, Greg, today. NFL big picture. We find out that the NFLPA and the NFL are in heavy talks about an 18th game. Is this only a matter of time?
Yes, and I've always believed that. When they went to 17, even probably before that, I said, the NFL is going to go to 18 games at some point. It's only a matter of time. And as long as they get the players get the 2 bye weeks as part of it, let's go. What's one more week and another week of rest involved? And we've heard other players say that. The NFL will be playing 18 games, and most likely with 2 byes in short order.